Hey, welcome back, guys. We've got some unbelievable updates today regarding retirement benefits, including Social Security benefits. We're also going to talk about Social Security disability as well as SSI as well. So, we've got some unbelievable news regarding that $1.7 trillion spending package, how much the administration was asking for, the Social Security Administration, and how much they actually ended up getting in regards to funding in that $1.7 trillion package, as well as some really unbelievable news when it comes to Social Security disability as well. So, with that said, guys, let's jump right into it. As always, if you like this content, please like and subscribe. Also, if you want to support my work and get free stocks, click the link in the description of this video. You have to deposit at least a penny, fully open your accounts, and you'll get those free stocks. Feel free to sell them. Again, it supports my work and you'll get free stocks as well. So, guys, what is this unbelievable news that just came out? Well, first of all, this first thing we're going to talk about here, we're going to talk about the $1.7 trillion package, how much was distributed or is going to be distributed to the administration versus how much they asked for, and how that's going to affect Social Security benefits. But first, let's quickly talk about Social Security disability. Now, if you guys look on your screen, you'll see headlines saying Social Security incredibly dated job opportunities cost thousands their disability benefits each year. Now, although technically Social Security disability, SSDI, is not a retirement benefit, we talk about it a lot on this channel because there's a lot of overlap, right? A lot of people who are in retirement get a SSDI because they had to retire early due to a disability. But there's been this massive issue. One, first of all, they're backlogged by thousands of applications, right? And that's mainly because they don't have enough funding to properly go through, to have enough employees to go through all of these applications. But secondly, they're using these outdated practices, right? And basically, they'll look at your application and they'll say, all right, can you technically do this job, this job, or this job? And the problem here, and this is outrageous, this is truly unbelievable. They're using jobs that don't even exist anymore to disqualify people to get disability benefits through Social Security, right? And some of the jobs you'll see listed here are nut sorter, dowel inspector, egg processor, cutter and paster of press clippings. The Social Security Administration is saying if you can do these jobs that don't exist anymore, you technically can't qualify for Social Security disability, right? And, most of you here watching my channel, you're in retirement, so you might not necessarily need disability. You probably know someone who's been affected by this, right? Let me know your thoughts on that in the comments below. But the fact that the Social Security Administration, and a lot of times on this channel, we'll talk about what Congress is doing, what Democrats are doing, what Republicans are doing, but this is actually the Social Security Administration, right? Usually we cut the administration a lot of slack because they're pretty beholden to what Congress is doing, right? In order to do things properly, they need the proper funding, right? In order to increase benefits, they need the proper funding. But this is really on the administration themselves. And recently, this is shocking, right? This is outrageous. They've been getting a lot of slack for this. And this is something that specifically the administration has to change when it comes to Social Security disability. Let me know in the comments. Do you guys know anybody who is a nut sorter? Or a dowel inspector or an egg processor? It's completely outrageous that they're disqualifying people from getting benefits, saying that they could technically be a nut sorter, which is a job that doesn't even exist, right? So that's really something that's been in the news. It's pretty outrageous. And recently, as far as the maximum benefit for SSDI, that's increased as well with this COLA to $3,627 a month. So there are some people out there who worked, they got their work credits from working their entire life. They're not quite old enough, to get their full retirement benefit, or even 62 to get that Social Security benefit, but they technically should qualify for Social Security disability. Some folks even, potentially qualifying for that max of $3,627 per month, but they're not getting it because of this antiquated system that's disqualifying tons and tons of people, right? Now, let me know your thoughts on that in the comments below. Now, some more headlines coming out that's really not the greatest news for those who are in retirement is the fact that this COLA has been great, right? And a lot of people are getting a larger benefit in just a couple of weeks. But the bad news is for a lot of people, that raise is going to put them over the edge to where they have to start paying federal income taxes, right? So let's take a look here. Now, oddly, those thresholds for which you get taxed have never been adjusted for inflation, right? So, because of this, if you have a 401k that you're drawing on, and then you're getting a bigger social security benefit, you're going to start paying more taxes if you cross those thresholds, right? So, and currently the threshold is 25,000 to $34,000 in income. 50% of your social security benefit will be taxed. And then if your income exceeds 34,000, up to 85% of your social security benefits are going to be taxed, right? So for those of you, let's say for example, you previously fell into the 25 to 34% bracket, $34,000 per year bracket. Now you're making over $34,000 per year when you combine your social security benefit, maybe your 401k, maybe you have a part-time job, things like that. Now all of a sudden, 85% of your social security benefits are going to be taxable under federal law. So that's really, really bad. And the problem with that is those thresholds have not been adjusting for inflation, right? So you have inflation going crazy, you have people's benefits going up, but now you have more people paying taxes on those benefits, which is not okay, right? If these benefits are increasing, they're increasing for a reason. These thresholds should be increased as well. Let me know your thoughts on that in the comments below. But as far as married taxpayers, the thresholds are even worse for two people married. Now, if your combined income is between 32,000 and 44,000, 50% of your social security benefit is taxable. 44,000 if your income is above 44,000, 85% of your social security benefit is taxable, right? So you see those numbers do not double. Those income thresholds do not double if you're married, right? So you kind of get penalized for having a spouse who also gets a good benefit, potentially has a good 401k as well, and you could easily end up over $44,000 per year combined in income and end up paying taxes on 85% of your social security benefit, right? This is something that we need changed. We need these thresholds increased and kind of more tethered to inflation to make sure we don't have more and more people paying taxes on their social security benefit, right? But this is just another thing that kind of slices away at your benefit, and as time goes on, that benefit gets weaker and weaker and weaker, right? Now, there's been a lot of talk with the new Congress coming into session right on January 3rd. With over the last 6 months, there's been a lot of talk about Social Security reform, right? Obviously, we had Rick Scott, he made those controversial statements about sunsetting benefits every 5 years, which then had Democrats coming out and saying, well, that means you're going to have benefits on the chopping block. Well, at the same time, we also had Bernie Sanders pushing for the Social Security Expansion Act, which would do the opposite, would actually add a $200 per month boost for the entire year of 2023. And with all these different proposals and kind of conversations around benefits, specifically Social Security, now, a lot of experts are wondering, okay, are they going to keep that conversation going into the new Congress after January 3rd? Or was that really just a midterm game, right? We're going to have to wait and see. Obviously, folks like Rick Scott, we're going to see if he tries to push for that rule where you sunset benefits every 5 years. We're going to have to wait and see if Bernie Sanders pushes for that Social Security Expansion Act. That would be wonderful. But quickly, let's take a look and see what the funding for Social Security, the administration, is going to be. Now, remember, guys, this $1.7 trillion spending bill, that is the omnibus bill they have to do every single year just to keep the government funded, right? And a portion of that is going to go to Social Security, to the Social Security Administration. And how much is going to go to the administration? Well, the administration asked for 14.8 billion. Let me zoom in here. Not sure if you guys could see that. The administration asked for 14.8 billion, right? Which is a 1.4 billion dollar increase over 2022. And I'm going to tell you what happens here every single year, guys. The administration has been desperate for the last, I'd say 10, 15 years or so to get an increase in their budget, right? A massive increase in their budget so they can properly take care of people who are on benefits, right? When you call the administration and you're on hold for 2 hours, it's because they don't have enough people and answering and managing the phones to not put you on hold for so long, right? When we talk about Social Security disability, like we spoke about earlier in today's show, you have people who have applied years ago still waiting for their case to be reviewed because they simply don't have enough employees to go through all the applications, right? And that's mostly by design. Since I think it's 2010, during the Obama administration, the Democrats basically agreed to spend less funding on Social Security in order to try and cut the deficit. Well, 10, 12 years later, we're seeing what happens. No one answers the phones. And when people apply for disability, basically it takes years to even have their applications looked at, right? Not even to mention the fact that they're getting denied for these antiquated jobs that don't even exist, right? At this point. Now, the administration asked for 14.8 billion, which is a 1.4 billion dollar increase over last year, which again would fund the administration to improve your experience, right, as someone who's on benefits. And instead of getting 1.4 billion, they are getting about half of that, 785 million. Now, they released a statement saying that although we are grateful that the bill includes a $785 million increase to the administration, to the operating budget, we are disappointed that this amount will barely enable the agency to tread water. As a result, it is unlikely that the administration will be able to substantially decrease the huge backlog in disability claims or significantly improve diminished customer service, right? So what are they saying? Basically exactly what I just said. They're asking for 1.5 billion, 1.4 billion. They're getting about 785 million, right? About half of that. And this is why you continue having this terrible service when you try and deal with your social security benefit. Then at the same time, they are doing things in this bill that don't help the Social Security Administration, but a lot of experts are saying does help Wall Street and it does help the stock market. And this involves what they were calling the Secure Act 2.0. We talked about this in my last few videos that they're basically including in the spending bill a rule that allows you to not tap into your 401k until you're 75, right? We won't go too deep into that on this show, but essentially right now, I believe at 72 years old, they make you start tapping into your 401k because the government wants to get its tax money on that. Well, they're increasing that to 75, which they're saying is great. It will help some seniors that don't want to use their 401k yet, but it's also going to help the kids of these seniors who want to inherit that money. Now think about it. If they keep raising it to 75, then 80, 85, eventually these people they pass away without touching that money, and then that money never gets taxed on, and then it gets passed on to their kids or their grandkids, right? So they're saying, this helps Wall Street, it helps keep funneling more money to the stock market, which always helps Wall Street, and it also helps those who are going to inherit this money because less of it's being used and less of it's going to be taxed, right? So we're always seeing these sneaky little things put into these bills that helps Wall Street, but does not help the programs like Social Security, 401ks, SSI, and SSDI as well, right? Now, one quick thing I want to touch on is SSI, right? Now, obviously, SSI is not Social Security, supplemental security income, totally different. This is a means tested based program. But one thing that unfortunately was not included in this bill either was something that would raise the cap on how many assets you could have when you're on SSI, right? And if you're on SSI, if you know anyone on SSI, this is actually a huge deal. They call this the Savings Penalty Elimination Act, right? Now, essentially, if you want to qualify for SSI, it's kind of similar to SSDI, except you can't have basically any assets. And I believe currently it's $2,000, right? So, yeah, if you see here, you have to have $2,000 or less of savings. Now, it makes sense to have caps, right, for these means tested programs, but this $2,000 limit has not been increased since the 80s, and they proposed raising it to $10,000, right? So that was going to be included in this bill, but it was not under the Savings Penalty Elimination Act. And this is just another way similar to the Social Security disability programs, right? They say, "Oh, you can be a nut sorter. Technically, you have the abilities to do this, so you don't qualify for SSDI." But that job doesn't exist, right? They say, "Oh, you want to be on SSI, supplementary security income, but you have $4,000 in the bank." Oh, you don't qualify, right? They're using these antiquated, these ancient guidelines that need to be updated to disqualify people now, right? It's just not okay. And it's just a trend of all these things that need to change. Now, despite the fact that none of these things were included in this $1.7 trillion package, right? The spending bill, Chuck Schumer is celebrating the fact that they got this done, right? Now, let's take a look and see what Chuck Schumer had to say. Obviously, I disagree. There should have been a lot more in there for 401ks, for healthcare, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security benefits, and SSI and SSDI as well. Let's quickly take a look and see what Chuck Schumer said.
And I would say that the omnibus was a appropriate metaphor for the last 2 years. A lot of Sturm and Drang, a lot of ups and downs, but at the end, a great result that really helped the American people. That is true of the omnibus, which I'll say something about now. A lot of hard work, a lot of compromise, but we funded the government with an aggressive investment in American families, American workers, American national defense. It's one of the most significant appropriations packages we've done in a really long time. It really helped women. I was really proud of those aspects, both in the omnibus, and then the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act was added to the bill. The Merkley Amendment dealing with feeding was added to the bill. And this bill is really, but things in the bill, to have a year of postpartum maternal care is an amazing thing as well. Child care, an increase in 30%. There is so many good things in the bill, it's hard to get them all out. As you know, the Electoral College was in. And we funded lots of our promises, such as the CHIPS bill and the bill to help the veterans who were hurt, the PACT Act, who were hurt by the burn pits. Summer lunches for kids now every summer. Increase in Pell Grants. So we've concluded this Congress, one of the most productive in decades, with one of the best omnibus packages in decades. And here's one of the things that amazes me. The amendment process made it better. Usually when you have a big omnibus, the amendment process makes it worse because the minority is trying to undo a lot of the things in the bill. But here we stood firm and got it done. And, again, as I said, it was a great 2 years. One of the most productive Congresses that we've had in a very long time. I am so proud of my colleagues, every single one of them.
Disagree.
To do this in a Senate that had 65 would have been momentous. To do it in a Senate with 50 was, and I say this about my colleagues, their unity was miraculous. And wow. So I feel very, very good about all of this, all of these things. We could go on and on about all the things that we did, all the things in the omnibus, and look at it carefully because there was so much in it that not everything got out at the very, very beginning. So with that, maybe, I'm not leaving anything out of importance. I don't know what she said. She's giving me finger signs. Ah, yes, of course. That was what she was doing. 9/11. That's what she said. I'm so proud of that. I want to thank Senator Gillibrand, who's been a great partner and leader on those issues. We did both. There were two aspects of 9/11 hanging out there. So in the compensation fund, some of the families members who had been left out, and it was a very good compromise that we added in victims of terrorism from other terrorist attacks on Americans around the globe. And then, of course, extending the bill, the 9/11 health benefits by a year. And now it's 5 years. It's at least 5 years that the benefits will be intact. So people who are first responders, our police, our fire, our construction workers, don't have to worry that, God forbid, when they or one of their friends who rush to the towers starts getting a cancer, that the money won't be there to help them. And I've heard of that so many different instances. So we're proud of that as well. Okay, let me open it up to questions first on the bill, the omnibus. I think, by the way, I've been leader 6 years, and I think we've had 5 or 6 omnibuses. We have rarely had a CR, and I'm really proud of that as well. Okay, go ahead, Manu.
10 minutes.
All right, guys. So for those of you who are just joining, we're talking about the fact that this $1.7 trillion package, it includes about $875 sorry, 785 million for the Social Security Administration, which is about half of what the administration asked for, right? I'm sorry, $785 million increase, right? So it's about 14 billion. They asked for 14.8. They got about half of that, right? They asked for a $1.4 billion increase and they got about half of that. And although Chuck Schumer is celebrating here, it's not quite enough. And this is why you'll continue having these long waits on the phones. You'll continue seeing these disability applications, sit on the shelf for months or even years because they don't have enough employees to go through these applications, right? But let's take a look and see what Chuck Schumer said.
First, what discussions have you had with Kevin McCarthy ahead of next year, and what is your level of concern in dealing with the issue like raising the debt ceiling next year?
Okay, well, let me answer that. First, I have not yet, I've seen Kevin McCarthy just as recently as yesterday with Prime Minister Zelensky, but I haven't had I'm going to wait till after his election to sit down and talk to him. I have sat down with Hakeem Jeffries, and we've started talking about how to work together. But let me say this is my hope and prediction that there is, not all the Republicans are MAGA. And the MAGA are the loudest, and they try to push the party further to the right. But there's a large chunk of Republicans, perhaps a majority, in the House and the Senate who are not MAGA. And this election showed them, I've heard them, I've talked to them, that following MAGA is like Thelma and Louise going over a cliff. And that's what we saw in the election. And I intend to reach out both in the Senate and even in the House to some of the more mainstream Republicans and say, let's work together. There are a whole lot of issues we can work together on. I'm not going to, you'll ask me which ones, I'm not going to delineate. But I believe the next 2 years, we have a huge uh, 2 years to follow. I think it's going to be a lot more productive than people think, and not just on appointments and judges and things that we in the Senate can do on our own. As to the debt ceiling, it's got to be done in a bipartisan way. It always is. A party that tries to hold up the government and demand something in return.
All right, guys, and just to clarify, the debt ceiling is the one that's never fully collapsed, and it's the one that they think could put a delay in your Social Security benefits, right? Like we're always hearing in the news, kind of this fear mongering of like, is the debt ceiling going to get done? Is the spending bill going to get done? Those are two different things, kind of confusing. Now, the spending bill usually hasn't been an issue, even if that gets done late. Usually doesn't affect the disbursement of Social Security benefits, but the debt ceiling, some experts think, could delay benefits because of the nuance of the logistics of all right, well, we have the trust fund. How long will it take them to start unloading more of the trust fund since that tax revenue might not necessarily be coming in? It's kind of a confusing situation, but that debt ceiling issue they were trying to get done before the end of the year, that's not going to happen now. So that they're going to have to tackle that in about 6 months. That's something else kind of looming over our heads to keep an eye on.
Lose. Yes.
You just now mentioned mainstream Republicans versus MAGA Republicans. This omnibus bill includes $45 billion for Ukraine. Obviously, at least get through the next few months. But next year, if you anticipate needing to appropriate more Ukraine aid, do you worry about the composition of the House?
Well, I'm just befuddled by some of these right wing Republicans who don't want to help Ukraine. It's always been the harder right you were, the more anti Soviet you were, the more anti Russian you were. And all of a sudden, they're pro. And I hope it's not a residue of Trump. Trump had a relationship with Putin that was poisonous for American security. And if these folks are following him, they're making a huge mistake. But that is not the majority of the Republicans. As you saw, we had a record amount of money for Ukraine. And I don't even know what the final numbers are in the bill. What were they? What?
45 billion.
No. What were the number of?
And that's what we talked about too, guys. 45 billion in 2023 for Ukraine, which is fine. They need help. But 14 billion for Social Security, the administration. How is that okay, right? And that 40 billion doesn't even account other countries that are getting additional funding. Why can they only include 14 billion for Social Security, but then they can do 40 billion for Ukraine, right? And again, that's fine. Help the people out there, but help the people here as well. Let me know your thoughts on that in the comments below.
Votes? 68. So you got a large number of, so it must be 18. No, it's 18 Republicans voting for the bill, maybe a few more who aren't here who might have voted for it as well. We have to stick by Ukraine. And I was watching carefully the body language of Kevin McCarthy when we were in that little room. And I think he's uncomfortable being, I hope, let me say, I hope he's uncomfortable being anti Ukraine. Yes.
You've seen 97 judges confirmed so far under President.
All right, guys. So if you're just joining, we are talking about the fact that, first of all, this $1.7 trillion package, it's including the 40 billion for Ukraine, only 14 billion for the administration, right? They asked for a $1.4 billion increase. They're only getting a $785 million increase, right? If you're just joining, we also talked about the fact that the Social Security Administration, when it comes to processing disability applications, they are literally disqualifying people based off of jobs that no longer exist. What that means is they'll take a look at your application and they'll say, okay, you're disabled, right? But could you technically be a nut sorter, right? Could you go sort nuts? That job doesn't exist anymore. That job was put on that list like 50, 60 years ago. Can you be a dowel inspector, an egg processor, or a cutter and paster of press clippings? Literally saying, okay, you qualify to do these jobs that no longer exist, so we're not going to qualify you for disability, right? That is completely ridiculous. We also talked about the fact that SSI, they are not letting people qualify for SSI if they have more than $2,000 in assets when that was put in place about 40 years ago. And if they tethered that to inflation, would be over $20,000 at this point, right? So senators from Ohio, Rob Portman and Sherrod Brown, were trying to include the Savings Penalty Elimination Act, which would bump this up to $10,000. So you could have $10,000, still qualify for SSI, and then tether it to inflation. So it would go up every single year, kind of like a COLA increase, right? Not a COLA increase, but an increase in the amount of assets you could have on hand, right? So let me know your thoughts in the comments, guys. Quickly, I like to talk about current events on this channel as well. And currently trending in the news is the fact that all of these flights across the country have been canceled. It's been completely shocking. Let me know in the comments if you guys have been affected by this as well. We have a lot of people kind of stuck all over the country. All these flights were canceled due to the storm. It's a little bit crazy. So let's take a look and see what's going on.
If you're flying Southwest Airlines this week, you may want to get comfortable. You could be waiting a while. Even with the weather clearing in much of the country, nearly 2/3 of all Southwest flights were canceled today. And look at this that we're about to show you on the far right side of this chart. 99% of tomorrow's flight cancellations tomorrow belong to just one airline, and that would be Southwest. This evening, the company's CEO offered an apology and an attempt to explain in this recorded message.
Our network is highly complex, and the operation of the airline counts on all the pieces, especially aircraft and crews, remaining in motion to where they're planned to go. With our large fleet of airplanes and flight crews out of position in dozens of locations, and after days of trying to operate as much.
So, guys, let me know if you've been affected by these flight cancellations. Essentially, what looks like's happened here, right? Obviously, these crazy storms going across the country affected all the airlines, right? But it looks like Southwest specifically was a lot less prepared to handle this type of thing for various reasons. First, apparently they do a lot more shorter flights, so a ton of like 1 hour flights, 2 hour flights. And then those workers have to jump off that flight and get onto the next flight. And they kind of keep doing that in a complex way all across the country. Now that becomes more difficult to manage as opposed to just an airline that does less flights, but like longer flights, right? So imagine like American Airlines does a ton of 4, 5, 6 hour flights. There's a lot more time in between so they can kind of switch flights and go to their next job. Whereas if you're doing a million tiny flights, you know, that kind of that snowball effect, no pun intended, that kind of domino effect, it becomes exponentially worse when you have all these short little tiny flights, right? That on top of that, we still have people getting sick from the illness and the pandemic, so there's not enough staff. That's basically every airline. But then apparently once Southwest tried to get their flights going again, they had to plan so many flights at once, right? Kind of like allocating, where's this worker going to go? Where's this pilot going to go? So quickly, so many flights at once. Apparently their system is so outdated that it can't handle programming that many flights at once. So they're doing this manually, and obviously that's just making things go even slower, right? But it's completely insane. A lot of people are being affected by this holiday. Let's take a quick look and see what is happening.
Our full schedule across the busy holiday weekend. we reached a decision point to significantly reduce our flying to catch up. We're focused on safely getting all of the pieces back into position to end this rolling struggle.
CNN's Lucy Kavanaugh is with some of the people still stuck in this mess.
Unfortunately, our next available seats for rebooking are on the 31st and beyond.
It's another day of travel chaos.
Every flight is canceled, so I don't know when I go back home.
Another day of flight cancellations, delays, and frayed nerves.
Phone calls were busy. You couldn't get a hold of anybody. It's awful.
Exhausted passengers braving long lines only to receive more bad news.
Because they said even if you go through this line, it might be up to New Year to get a flight.
Travelers on Southwest bearing the brunt of the post-Christmas cancellations, many stranded until the new year.
The next flight that was offered was in January, and they couldn't even get us home back to Pittsburgh.
Southwest CEO Bob Jordan warned of more tough days ahead, according to a transcript of a company-wide message CNN has obtained, while Chief Operating Officer Andrew Watterson said the airline systems were unable to match available crews to available aircraft, and it had to be done by hand.
From what I can tell, Southwest is unable to locate even where their own crews are, let alone their own passengers, let alone baggage. Their system really has completely melted down. And I've made clear that our department will be holding them accountable.
Wow, that's terrifying, guys. So apparently the government now investigating Southwest, seeing if they did something negligent, all these people stranded across the country. It's completely insane, right? Hopefully you guys were not affected by that. But again, if you guys are just joining today's stream, I want to quickly recap some of the outrageous news here, right? First of all, for people who apply for ssdi, Social Security Disability, these are people who worked, right? These are people who got these credits by working. They're quite not at that age where they can qualify for actual Social Security, but they're disabled, right? So they need their benefits. They are disqualifying people, and it's crazy this is just coming out now. They're disqualifying people if it's deemed that they qualify to work certain jobs that don't even exist anymore, right? So they're saying, okay, you were a teacher, you're just, you're disabled, you can't be a teacher anymore, but you can be a dowel inspector or an egg processor. Go be an egg processor. You don't qualify for your benefit, right? And the crazy thing is, these are massive benefits that people are losing out on, right? The maximum Social Security disability benefit, if you look on your screen, is $3,627 per month, right? That's the maximum. That's for someone who worked, they got all their credits. They were at the highest bracket of income. That's a massive benefit to be missing out on because the administration is using these outdated guidelines, right? And again, on this channel, a lot of times we'll criticize the government or we'll criticize, Democrats or Republicans for what they're doing. We don't really criticize the administration too often, right? We tend to kind of cut them a break and say, you know what, their hands are tied. They're not getting enough funding, which is true. But this is on them. They need to fix this so people can get their benefits like they deserve, right? Then we also talked about SSI. The fact that SSI, they only let people qualify if they have less than $2,000 in assets, but that number was put in place in the 1980s, hasn't been increased at all over the last 40 years, right? Now, how does that make sense that has not been increased with inflation? And unfortunately, there was a nice bill called the Savings Penalty Elimination Act that the senators from Ohio, Rob Portman and Sherrod Brown, they wanted to include that in this last 1.7 spending bill. Unfortunately, that was not included. That would have raised the asset limit to $10,000 and at the same time pegged it to inflation going forward. So this would no longer be an issue, right? So unfortunately, similar to disability, people on SSI kind of got screwed in this last package as well, right? Then we went on to talk about the fact that the administration, the Social Security Administration, they asked for a $1.4 billion increase in their funding over the funding that they got in 2022. And this would essentially just help them run the administration, right? Pay their employees, hire more employees, right? So more people are there to answer the phones, to help you with your questions, to help you maybe figure out, what's the best process for you. Should you take your benefit? Should you not? Even do things like review SSDI applications, right? They have massive backlogs of thousands of applications that go back for years because they don't have enough employees because they don't have enough funding to hire enough employees, right? So they asked for a $1.4 billion increase, and you'd think with 40 billion being spent on Ukraine, that's in this bill, right? With another 40 billion being spent on other countries just to provide aid to other countries, you'd think 1.4 billion, which actually totals to about 14.8 billion. You think 14.8 billion would not be insane when they're spending basically 80 billion just helping other countries, right? And that's not even including all the other crazy things in this bill. You'd think 14.8 billion would be enough, but they only ended up doing about 14 billion, right? So they asked for 1.4 billion as far as an increase. They're only getting a $785 million increase to the Social Security Administration. That means when you call, you're going to keep having these long waits. When you apply for SSDI, you're going to keep, having these long waits as well, have them, maybe years until they look at them. And then they're going to keep saying, oh, go be a nut picker, right? Go be a nut sorter. Then a lot of people are criticizing this bill because they're saying it helps Wall Street in a way. And this is related to 401ks. And this is kind of a controversial issue here because the 401k changes put in this $1.7 trillion spending bill, they do help the people, but they also help Wall Street, right? And we explain that by showing that basically what they're doing is they're going to say you can be 75 years old until you're forced to tap into your 401k, which is good for those who are in retirement. They'd rather make their 401k last longer and say, you know what, I'm going to use my Social Security. I'm going to let my 401k keep growing. But right now, when you're 72, they make you start taking some out every single year. Now they're increasing that to 75. But what they're also saying is not only does this help people, but it helps Wall Street because it allows more money to keep funneling into stocks, which is always good for Wall Street, for the financial sectors. But it's also helping those who are going to inherit these 401ks because, if you keep raising these ages, eventually folks just pass away. It's all sitting there. It never got taxed. And then the children and the grandchildren inherit that, right? So basically helping the rich. Basically, the argument is you're helping the rich more than you're helping the average person, right? And I would honestly agree with that, but at the same time, it does help the people. But what I would like to see is bolster 401k, kind of like let your employers match a little more, right? Kind of incentivize them to match more, as well as also obviously increase programs like Social Security, SSI, and SSDI as well, right? Now, guys, for those of you who have been paying attention, I like to cover some trending news as well. And I want to talk about this blizzard, right, that's been happening across the country, specifically in Buffalo. And a lot of people have been passing away out here. It's terrible. And a lot of seniors have been affected by this, right? Seniors, especially those who are 70, 80 years old, those who live alone, some of them are widows. They're trapped in their homes. In some situations, they lost power. And it's such a tragic situation, guys. And it's been reported that a lot of the people affected by this are seniors because they don't have anyone really to help them. And they don't really have the means to help themselves either, right? But let's take a quick look, do a quick update, and see how things are going on the East Coast.
And Mona Kazarabdi joins me live now from Buffalo with more. Hi, Mona. 100 military police officers have now been deployed to help keep drivers off the roads there. Walk us through, why was that necessary and how is it going?
So the purpose of the driving ban that was implemented was to keep non-essential vehicles off the roads. That way, the essential vehicles, the emergency ambulances, the power restoration vehicles, and also just any kind of essential vehicle that needed to be on the road that can come back and help restore power, that can attend to the emergency calls that they weren't able to at the height of the storm. And the problem was that a lot of people that have been trapped in their homes since before Christmas, since the storm began, they were so anxious to get out that they started hitting the roads. And especially when businesses started opening back up, pharmacies started opening back up, we saw a lot more traffic yesterday and the day before, and that was creating a problem for these essential vehicles. And so the military, the mayor asked the National Guard to send about 100 military police officers so that they can help keep these non-essential vehicles off the road. And they can also, for example, state police, they can conduct stops and enforce this driving ban. We also saw that state fire sent tactical vehicles to pair up with ambulances so that they can navigate these snow-filled roads. The mayor was saying there was a lot of people in Honda Accords, as he put it, getting stuck again, creating a problem.
Now, Buffalo's mayor says that he hopes to lift the driving ban later today. So what happens to all the abandoned vehicles on the city streets, and what's the latest on the victims?
That's a good question. So what they've been doing before they were able to remove the vehicles, they started tagging them with caution tape. And then once they were able to get tow trucks in, they started moving them. And the mayor told me they moved about over 100 cars to different lots to get them off the street so that the plows can come and haul the snow off the streets. And now people are able to recover their cars that way. As for the victims, I mentioned in my story about William Clay. I spoke with his sister, Sophia, who told me that he was going to the store on Christmas Eve, and it was actually his birthday. He's a Buffalo native. He thought this was just another storm, and things started changing very quickly, and he never made it back home. And so that just kind of shows you that, Western New York is used to these conditions. They get hit hard in the winter, but this storm was historic. This storm wasn't like the other storms.
Yeah, heartbreaking for that family.
All right, guys. Well, stay safe out there. Hope all the seniors out there on the East Coast are doing well and are safe. Let me know your thoughts on that. And let me know your thoughts on this funding included for the administration and kind of how, honestly, I think it's sad that they couldn't give them the 1.4 billion. Let me know your thoughts on that in the comments. Let me know your thoughts on these Social Security SSDI programs as well. And guys, with that said, thank you so much for watching. Again, if you like this content, please like and subscribe. If you want those free stocks and you want to support my work, click the link in the description here. Remember, you have to fully open your account and deposit just 1 penny to get those free stocks. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next show.